Hey everybody, Phil Easy here. Today I'm going to take you through how to plant a walnut tree. I picked up a few nut trees. I was lucky enough to get some almonds and some walnuts, and I'm going to be planting those today. I wanted to show you how and what I consider when I'm planting these things. I didn't realize that you can't plant them around animals. I had planned on having them out in the pasture, create shade, but I found out that both walnuts and almonds can branches if they fall and wilt, and if the animals eat them can be toxic to the animals. So had to change gears and figure out where to put them. When you're thinking about planting your walnut trees, it will depend on the variety, how big they'll get, and your conditions. But this one happens to be a Cascade walnut, and what I'm going to be placing it at, it's going to be by itself, but if I was putting two next to each other, I'd be thinking of at least 15 feet of space between the two trees, up to like 25 feet. And there's different measurements though for if you're wanting to grow a walnut orchard for nuts or for wood production and all that stuff. You will have to take a look at what those numbers might be if that's what you're thinking of doing. I'm just wanting to get some trees in so we can have some nut production in the future. I used some stakes here. I end up staking this not because of wind. That would be a good reason to stake a tree if you live in a windy environment. But I'm staking this because I'm going to put a cage around it so that the wildlife, deers and elk, can't get to it and eat the young leaves. I'm concerned they might. I don't know if they will or not, but I don't want to take that chance. So the process I show you today will be planting and protecting, caging your walnut or almond trees, nut trees. So once you've figured out the location you want to plant your tree, you want to pre-water it before you transplant it. I like to do that before I start digging my hole. It would give it time to drain, but you really don't want to have a dry root ball. When you go to pull the tree out of the container here, all the soil will crumble away and it'll be a mess and it'll be hard to manage. This way it'll stay together in a nice clump as we put it into the hole that we dig. So you want to pre-water it, soak it, and once you've done that, then you go from there. Before you dig, most local areas have a phone number you can call. It's usually called Call Before You Dig, pretty simple stuff. Give them a call, make sure you know for certain that there are no utility lines underneath where you're digging. You don't want power, sewer, any of that sort of stuff happening while you're digging. It can be very dangerous. So before you plant that shovel in the ground, and you've picked out your spot, make sure they map it. And they'll spray paint where the hazards are, and you just make sure you avoid those and you'll be fine. So the size of hole I'm going to go for can be anywhere from 2 inches larger than your root ball up to 3 times the diameter or size of your root ball. I think that will depend on what you're planting your tree in. If you've got lots of good soil, you probably don't need to do as big a hole. I live in a place we'll probably discover that's pretty sandy underneath, so I might do a slightly larger hole and supplement the hole for the planting. Now, not everybody likes to supplement because there's a belief that the trees will be dependent upon those nutrients and you want them to establish naturally so they can take care of themselves. Because I'm in a sandy area, depending on what I see here, I'm still going to consider doing it that way, but it's totally up to each person and how you go about that one. It'll be dependent again upon your environment. So I'm going to start with doing a hole here, and we're going to see what's underneath, and I'll determine how big to go from there. So before you plant, you want to look at the tree itself and what they call the trunk flare. That's this part right here where the tree goes from narrow and then it flares out and goes wider. This part should be visible after you plant it. You do not want to bury that. This is the point at which the tree was grafted onto a rootstock. You want to have it so when we plant this in the hole, the soil level will remain at roughly the same height with this exposure. So a really easy way of getting your hole cut to the size you want is decide if you're going to go the 2 inches, that's about the minimum extra you'd put around, up to 3 times the size of the root ball itself. So decide how big you're going to go, and then what I do is have my container in its place. I call before I dig, of course, and then I'm going to carve around the container while it's there, create my circle first, Then I'll remove the container. Now I'll move the container off. I know exactly where my hole is and where I want it to be, and I'll skim the top layer off first. A few roots in here, lots of trees and bushes growing around, so I want to get rid of those roots so they don't steal any of the water or nutrients. So once I've dug my hole to the size that I think is about right, I'm going to put the container with the tree back into the hole to make sure. I'm looking at the soil level here and how it compares to out here. And what I'm seeing is it's roughly equal. I don't want it to be too high, and I definitely don't want it to be too low. I'm pretty happy with this. I might take a bit more off, but this is about right. Now that we've got our hole dug, we're going to want to put our tree into it. Now we want to remove it from the container gently and carefully. You don't want to pick the tree up by the actual tree itself, which makes it kind of hard with a container around it to then get it into the hole. Here's what I've learned and how I do it now. So I'll tip the tree over, watch the top of your tree, make sure your branches aren't snapping. I'm going to bang on the sides of the container, loosen any sort of stickiness that's happening in there, and then I'm going to tip this almost horizontal and gently shake and drag out the root ball. All the stuff that falls out with it will fall into the hole. We'll drop our tree into it. Put all your extra soil in there. Now what we're going to want to do is make sure the tree's level, perpendicular, straight up and down. And you want to make sure you look at it from a couple angles. Okay, now that we have our tree in the hole at the right depth, not too deep, we don't want to be covering up any of this part of the tree. We want to keep it at the flare, the part that widens. That flare needs to stay out and exposed to air, or else your roots, you can choke off your roots and you don't get the good growth. So now that this is level, straight up and down, I'm happy with where it is. I'm going to backfill any of the space. I use topsoil from a wholesale club sort of place, really cheap stuff. I look for the cheapest, but what I like about this stuff, and I'm not plugging the brand, I don't get paid a thing to buy them. This stuff's called Black Earth, and it's like a topsoil, but it's got a lot of forest fines in it, and I really like the forest fines. It's got pieces of tree and such, and I noticed that when I get these trees from the nursery, that's exactly what they have going on here. So I'm just going to backfill the area, and we're going to pat it down. Okay, so now I'm just spreading it out, again paying attention to where the old soil went up to. I don't really want to cover that height at all. Spread it around. I'm going to pat it down gently but firmly. Take out any of the air pockets. That would dry out your roots if you leave air pockets in there. Now if you live in a windy area, you would want to stake it, single stake, tie onto here. Don't use anything super small, it will cut your tree trunk. twist tie type material is okay. Try to find, I sometimes will use cloth, just a strip of cloth or something like that. I'm going to put 3 stakes around this with a cage so I protect it more from the animals than from the wind. So my next step is to water this. You want to water thoroughly, not too fast, but you do want to give it a good soaking, and you want to water about once a week. If it's not too hot out, about 1 inch each time. Little tip on this fencing, it's pretty easy to bend with your hands, so when I cut it, I make sure I leave a length out, and I'll use that to hook on and just fold in. You don't even have to do it on every single one. I do it on a few. Find a spot where it can hook on. Bend it backwards. And that's going to keep it on. The animals aren't going to be getting in. They may try to push on it. We'll watch and see. If so, then I'll adjust. But for now, I'm hoping this is enough deterrent to keep the deer and elk away. So there you have it, everybody. That's planting a nut tree. How to do it, Phil Easy way. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button below, your notification bell, hit the thumbs up if you liked it. Feel free to put any comments down. Do my best to answer them as I can. And yeah, thanks and have a great day. Take care. Bye.